Billionaire father watches Waitress teach his disabled son to dance. What happens next changes everything. The ballroom shimmered like a dream, gold light spilling from chandeliers, violins humming beneath the chatter of the city's elite. Every guest seemed to glide effortlessly across the polished marble floor, their laughter blending into the rhythm of the orchestra. Waiters carried trays of champagne, and cameras flashed as if the night itself demanded attention. At the center of it all sat Richard Hale, a man whose face often appeared in magazines, the kind of billionaire whose name opened doors and silenced conversations. His suit was perfect, his tie a precise shade of confidence. But behind his polished exterior, there was a distance in his eyes, a man who lived more in numbers than in moments. Beside him sat Ethan, his 10-year-old son. The boy's wheelchair was sleek and expensive, yet it couldn't mask the smallness of his frame or the quiet ache in his gaze. Ethan's head turned slowly, following the motion of the dancers, his lips parting as if he wanted to speak but didn't know if it mattered. "Dad," he finally whispered, his voice fragile against the music. "Do you think I could ever dance?" Richard didn't look up from his phone. His fingers tapped across the screen, firing off an email worth millions. "We'll see, buddy," he murmured absently. "Maybe one day." The words hung between them, hollow and unfinished. Ethan looked back at the dance floor, eyes reflecting the swirl of colors and motion that felt just out of reach. He gripped the armrest of his chair, trying to mimic the movements of the dancers with his hands, small gestures that carried a quiet wish. A few tables away, Maya, a young waitress in a crisp black uniform, noticed the boy. Her steps slowed as she passed, her eyes softening. Something about his stillness amidst the glitter and motion tugged at her heart. She watched him for a brief moment before returning to her tray, but the image of his longing stayed with her. Richard's assistant leaned close, whispering about stock projections, acquisitions, and meetings scheduled at dawn. Richard nodded mechanically, barely noticing that his son had fallen silent beside him. Ethan's small face glowed under the ballroom lights, his expression caught between awe and sadness. As the orchestra swelled, the music seemed to speak what the boy couldn't, a yearning to move, to feel, to belong to that rhythm he could only watch from the sidelines. And somewhere, unnoticed by most, a waitress paused at the edge of the dance floor, her heart already deciding to change the course of this night. The music shifted into something softer, warm jazz filling the air like velvet smoke. Laughter echoed around the room as couples swayed to the rhythm, lost in the glow of chandeliers and champagne. Ethan sat still, his small hands folded tightly on his lap, trying to hide the tremor of hope that kept flickering inside him. Across the room, Maya balanced an empty tray against her hip, watching him between her rounds. She had seen many kinds of people in her job, the proud, the powerful, the broken. But something in this boy's eyes made her stop pretending the world didn't need kindness. She took a slow breath, set her tray down, and walked toward him. When she reached his table, Richard was on the phone again, pacing a few steps away. Ethan noticed her shadow before her voice. "Hey," Maya said softly, bending down so her eyes met his. "You ever tried dancing with your hands?" Ethan blinked in confusion. "With my hands?" She nodded, her smile small but sure. "Dance isn't just about feet. It's about how you feel the music." He hesitated, glancing at his father, still talking, still not looking. Then he looked back at her. "I don't know how." "That's okay," she said, extending her hand, palm up. "You lead." "I'll follow." For a moment, the boy froze. His fingers twitched, unsure whether to take it. The room felt suddenly too big, too bright. But then, slowly, almost shyly, his small hand slipped into hers. Maya began to sway lightly, guiding his arm through the air in rhythm with the music. The motion was simple at first, a wave, a lift, a gentle turn, but something magical began to happen. Ethan's face lit up, his movements growing bolder. He started to move his other hand, mimicking her rhythm, shaping the air as if painting invisible music. The people nearby began to notice. The laughter dimmed. The band saw it too, how this small boy in a wheelchair had found a way to dance without standing. The drummer softened his beat. The saxophone slowed its breath, letting Ethan's small motions set the tempo. It was no longer a gala. It was a story being written in real time, a quiet miracle unfolding under chandeliers. Maya followed his lead, spinning slightly with every motion he made, her expression full of awe. Ethan giggled, something pure and bright echoing through the stunned silence. For the first time, he wasn't just watching life move past him, he was part of its rhythm. Across the hall, Richard stopped mid-sentence. His phone lowered slowly. His son, his quiet, withdrawn, fragile boy, was laughing, commanding the rhythm of a room full of strangers. For the first time in years, Richard didn't know what to say. He could only watch. His heart, buried for so long under numbers and meetings, gave a sudden, painful, beautiful ache. Applause rippled through the ballroom like a wave breaking on shore. It began hesitantly, one pair of hands clapping, then another, until the entire hall joined in. The music faded, replaced by the sound of genuine wonder. Ethan's laughter filled the space, light and uncontrollable, a sound so rare it turned heads faster than the applause itself. Maya stood beside him, breathless but smiling, her hand still resting lightly on his shoulder. She didn't bow or acknowledge the crowd. Her eyes stayed fixed on Ethan as if the rest of the world had disappeared. He was glowing, his cheeks flushed, eyes shining with pride and disbelief. "Dad, did you see that?" Ethan said, voice trembling from excitement. I was dancing." Richard was frozen for a heartbeat, standing among the crowd, applause ringing in his ears. He clapped too, awkwardly at first, almost uncertain how to join something so pure. Then he pushed through the people between them and reached the table, his expression soft but unreadable. Ethan turned toward him, eager for approval. "I did it, Dad!" Richard crouched down beside his son, looking into his eyes, and for a long moment, the billionaire who never slowed down stopped completely. He swallowed hard, then smiled faintly. "Yeah, you did, champ. You really did." The guests began to drift back into conversation, but their glances lingered. Some smiled, some whispered, but the energy had changed. Something sacred had just happened in front of them. Maya quietly began to step away, feeling that her part was over. But Richard's voice stopped her. "Wait," she turned, a little unsure. He stood now, tall, his voice lower, softer than before. "Thank you for that." "You didn't have to." Maya shrugged lightly, her smile patient. "Sometimes we don't do things because we have to. We do them because someone needs it." Her words landed like a stone dropped in still water. Richard's gaze faltered, his practiced composure cracking just a little. He looked at Ethan again, still beaming, still moving his fingers as if replaying the dance in his mind. For the first time, Richard saw something he hadn't seen in years. Not a fragile boy bound to a wheelchair, but a soul unshaken by limits. And he realized, with quiet shame, that he'd been too busy chasing power to see the miracle sitting right beside him. As Maya turned to leave, Ethan called out, "Thank you, Miss Maya." She turned, smiling wide. "Anytime, little man. You just keep leading." Richard watched her walk away, disappearing back into the crowd, and he felt a strange tightness in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name yet. But it was the beginning of change. The music started again, but it sounded different now, warmer, more human. He looked down at his son, who was still smiling, and whispered softly, almost to himself, "I think it's time I learned to dance too." Morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of a small cafe on the quiet side of the city, the kind of place that smelled like roasted beans and second chances. The door chimed softly as Richard stepped inside, his expensive shoes clicking against the tiled floor that had seen more struggle than luxury. He looked completely out of place, tailored suit, polished watch, but there was something different about him now. The weight in his eyes was no longer pride. It was reflection. Behind the counter, Maya was wiping down tables, humming softly to herself. Her hair was tied up, her uniform plain, yet she carried the same calm grace she had that night at the gala. When she looked up and saw him, surprise flickered across her face. "Mr. Hale?" she asked carefully, unsure if she should even approach. He smiled awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. "Just Richard today? I hope I'm not interrupting." She shook her head. No, not at all. What brings a billionaire to my little corner of the city? He chuckled softly, a bit embarrassed. A promise I didn't realize I made. Maya tilted her head, curious. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and for a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the coffee machine filled the silence. Then Richard leaned forward, his voice quiet but sincere. You changed something in my son that night, he said. And in me, too. I've spent my whole life building things, companies, towers, numbers. But somehow I forgot how to build moments, the kind that matter. Maya's expression softened. Your son didn't need much, Mr. Hale. Just someone to believe in what he already had. He nodded, staring down at his hands. I've been thinking about that. About all the kids like him, who just need a chance to fay. The morning sun poured through tall glass windows, spilling gold across the polished wooden floor. The air was alive with music, soft, rhythmic, full of life. Laughter echoed off the walls of the brand-new Ethan Hale Center for Healing Through Dance, where children moved, rolled, and swayed to the beat in their own unique ways. Some wore braces on their legs, some guided walkers, others sat in wheelchairs like Ethan, their hands painting shapes through the air that looked like joy itself. Colorful ribbons hung from the ceiling, catching the light each time a small dancer moved beneath them. The walls were covered in painted handprints, tiny splashes of every shade of hope. At the center of the room sat Ethan, older somehow, not in age but in spirit. His wheelchair had been customized for dance, its wheels lined with LED lights that shimmered with each turn. He looked up as Maya entered, dressed not as a waitress anymore, but as a dance instructor, her outfit simple but elegant, her smile still as warm as the first day he met her. The children quieted as the music paused. Maya stood before them, hands on her hips, the proud calm of a teacher who believes in her students more than they do themselves. All right, everyone, she said, her voice bright. Remember what dance really means. It's not about steps. It's about feeling. It's about leading with your heart. Then she turned to Ethan, her eyes soft with that familiar spark. You remember what I told you the first time, right? Ethan's smile stretched wide. The same innocent, fearless grin he'd worn in that glittering ballroom months ago. Yeah, he said, I lead. You follow. Maya bowed dramatically, making the kids giggle. Then lead the way, partner. Ethan raised his hands, slowly at first, guiding the air as if commanding an invisible orchestra. The other children followed, mimicking his movements, their arms sweeping like wings. The music swelled, gentle piano turning into a beat that filled the room with rhythm and warmth. One by one, the kids found their own way to move, not perfectly, not evenly, but beautifully. In the back, Richard stood quietly, leaning against the wall. He wasn't in a suit today. His sleeves were rolled up, his watch gone. He looked lighter. His eyes glistened as he watched his son move with such confidence, surrounded by children who finally had a place to belong. Beside him, a photographer lowered his camera. Sir, would you like a photo for the press? Richard shook his head gently. No, he said, smiling faintly. This one's just for us. The music grew louder, joyful. Ethan's laughter filled the air again, laughter that had once been locked away behind silence and fear. Maya clapped to the rhythm, spinning alongside the children. Their movements weren't synchronized, but their hearts were. Richard stepped closer, unable to stop the tear that escaped down his cheek. He thought of all the boardrooms, the deals, the lonely nights filled with noise but no meaning, and how none of it compared to this moment. He whispered to himself, This is what wealth should feel like. As the song reached its end, Maya gestured to Ethan. What do we say, Captain? Ethan grinned and shouted with joy. Keep dancing! The children cheered, clapping wildly, their voices rising together. The sunlight gleamed off the mirrors and ribbons, wrapping them all in gold. Richard stood there, heart full, realizing his life had turned into something richer than all the money he'd ever earned. A melody born from kindness, led by the smallest hands and danced by those who refused to be defined by what they couldn't do. And as the music faded, father and son shared a look, one of understanding, love, and quiet promise. The promise that this time Richard wouldn't just watch. He'd dance too.